We've listed some of the recommendations that we think ought to take place. Better training of poll workers. Now, I would say that the training session that I went to in Summit County was very thorough. One, a poll worker needs to go to the training session. And it's a couple hours long, it's very thorough, and it covers the gamut of what you might experience on election day. Quite honestly, I stayed after. I had some questions, and I wanted to look over the M100, which is the voting machine, the optical scan, and I had some questions about how it works. Again, like I say, our machine worked very well that day at our precinct. But I think this is helpful. You know, for instance, one of the talks that I gave, a lady came up afterwards and she had worked the polls for years, and she said, "What's a provisional ballot?" You know, if you don't know what a provisional ballot is, you probably shouldn't be working the polls. So some of our elderly, God bless them, that are working these polls year after year after year, need young people to step up to the plate, maybe take a vacation day off work, and then, you know, you do get paid a little something from the local county board of elections, but do your civic duty. And we're going to help in an ad campaign that will help young people to get involved because we need some young blood to work these precincts. Some of the problems that took place in Cuyahoga County, for instance, we had a gentleman that worked inside the board. He wasn't able to be with us today. In fact, he's working at the board, but his name's Richard May. You'll see his testimony in the packet. Richard details that he was counting provisional along with the poll book last November's election. They found 4 cases of double voting, somebody who had voted absentee and had voted at the location. That was passed on to the board. The board was supposed to have forwarded that on to the county prosecutor, but nothing was ever done with that. Something that the Attorney General and the Secretary of State may look into as to what exactly took place with those 4 instances of obviously double voting, and it's a sworn statement in our packet. If you look at Hamilton County, there you had more due diligence, tracking down 19 indictments initially. The Secretary of State's report, by the way, was in response to the concerns that were raised by Ohioans across the state. Initially, the Secretary of State put out a statement that things ran pretty smoothly. I understand why he would believe that, until you start hearing some of the feedback, as we did in our office, of a growing concern of irregularities in early voting, on election day, and then some of these problems that took place at polling locations. He then, to his credit, started a statewide effort to hold open hearings of anyone who had concerns with voting irregularities, suspicion of voter fraud, and or voter suppression. So he held these hearings across the state, and then put together the first ever voter fraud report in May 23rd. How many of you got that? Well, that was very helpful. It was, 625 instances of irregularities, using again his database of the county boards of election, and then of course cross-referencing in the states that are working with Ohio in cross-checking our databases. For instance, in Florida, there were 8 people that voted not only in Ohio, but also in Florida double voting. And they found that by the Secretary of State's cross-referencing. But where the concern lies is that Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Indiana, all which border the state of Ohio, none of them are in that collaborative of exchange of databases. So, you know, theoretically, someone can vote in Ohio, walk across the border and vote in PA or Indiana or West Virginia. We wouldn't know it. There's no way, easy way to track that down. So the voter fraud that was reported in the May 23rd report of 135 cases that were turned over to local law enforcement for prosecution, that list grew because many of you know here in Franklin County, their report came out just a few days later, 90 cases of double voting. They had actually 150 cases of irregularities, but of those 90 confirmed cases, according to the board, of double voting, they turned that over to the local county prosecutor. In addition, Hamilton County found 3 more indictments, and that was individuals who don't reside in the state of Ohio, who applied for application for absentee ballot and voted in the 2012 presidential election, never being a resident of Ohio. So these are some of the instances of the known voter fraud, and of course the problems with provisional ballots. In fact, if you ask a precinct worker and you say the word provisional ballot, they'll roll their eyes, as they did in my precinct on Tuesday. The one lady said, we had a ton of problems with those last year. Well, as I witnessed how it can happen, and we only had 6 provisional ballots that day, and only maybe less than 200 voters that came in. I can only imagine what it would be like in a presidential election year. Now, one of the things that we haven't addressed yet is court-ordered voting. The court got it wrong